The grand chamber of the Galactic Council shook with fear. Ambassador Krixaval stood at the center, his blue feathers trembling as he spoke. The news he brought would change everything. 3 star systems are gone, he said. His voice echoed in the massive room. The Devourers consumed them in less than 1 cycle. Around him, representatives from 12 different species sat in silence. They all knew what this meant. The Devourers were not like any enemy they had faced before. These beings were made of pure entropy. They ate reality itself, leaving nothing behind but empty void. Commander Zeftar watched the holographic displays floating before him. Each screen showed another civilization going dark. The Althari Empire's greatest military leader had never felt so helpless. His 6 arms moved across the control panels, checking data, searching for patterns, looking for any sign of hope. "X, Fourth Hand Collective is gone," reported a small gray alien from the corner. "They tried to use time manipulation to escape. It didn't work. The Vorthons could control time itself. They could slow it, speed it up, even move through it. But against the Devourers, their power meant nothing. The creatures existed outside of normal space and time. They consumed everything: matter, energy, even the fundamental forces that held the universe together." "What about the crystalline minds?" asked someone else. "Scattered to cosmic dust yesterday," came the grim reply. The crystalline minds were beings of pure thought and energy. They didn't even have physical bodies to destroy. Yet the Devourers had consumed them anyway. The arguing started then. It always did when fear took hold. The Nexari, tall beings with purple skin and too much pride, insisted their quantum weapons could still work. Their leader, Maltor, stood up and pounded his fist on the table. "We have the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. We just need to concentrate our fire. Your weapons failed at the outer rim," reminded Elder Morgoth of the Eternal Watchers. His crystalline body flickered with different colors as he spoke. Just like everyone else's weapons failed, the ethereal luminance suggested something different. These beings looked like living light, floating above their seats rather than sitting in them. Their spokesperson's voice sounded like singing. "We should ascend," she said. "Leave this physical universe behind. Move to a higher plane of existence where the Devourers cannot follow. And abandon trillions of beings who cannot ascend?" Zeftar asked. "The ones who need physical bodies to survive?" The room erupted in more arguments. Some wanted to fight. Others wanted to run. A few suggested surrender, though no one knew if the Devourers would even understand the concept. They seemed to have no intelligence, no purpose except consumption. While the leaders argued, a young Althari researcher named Velian ran through the ancient archives deep beneath the council building. She had been searching for 3 days without sleep. Her purple eyes were tired, but she couldn't stop. There had to be something in the old records, some weapon or strategy that everyone had forgotten. The archives went deep underground, level after level of knowledge from thousands of civilizations. The lower she went, the older the records became. Some were so old that the computers couldn't translate them anymore. On the lowest level, in a section that required special permission to enter, Velian found something strange. A single tablet, locked inside a containment field that was still active after millennia. The field wasn't meant to keep people out. It was meant to keep something in. Warning symbols covered the container, not just from one species, but from dozens. All saying the same thing in different languages: do not open, do not read, do not remember. But Velian was desperate. The Devourers had just consumed another system while she stood there. Millions of lives gone in an instant. She disabled the containment field. The tablet was made of simple metal, nothing special about it except for the words carved into its surface. As the translation program worked, Velian felt her blood turn cold. The tablet spoke of a species so dangerous that even mentioning their existence had been forbidden. They had many names across the galaxy: the Chaos Bringers, the Unbound, the Deathworlders, the Impossibles. But according to the tablet, they called themselves by a simple name: humans. Velian read more, her hands shaking. These humans came from a planet designated as Earth, located in a quarantined sector of space. The quarantine wasn't to protect them, it was to protect everyone else from them. The tablet contained records of humanity's past interactions with galactic civilization. Every account was contradictory, impossible, terrifying. Humans were described as insanely violent, yet incomprehensibly compassionate. They thrived in environments that killed other species. They bonded emotionally with anything, including their enemies, including inanimate objects, including abstract concepts. One record described humans taking sides in a conflict, then switching sides halfway through because they felt bad for the losing team. Another told of humans domesticating predators that had terrorized a planet for centuries, turning them into pets. A third account, barely believable, claimed humans had once fought a war against themselves just to see who would win. But the most terrifying part was why they had been quarantined. 3,000 years ago, during the War of Shadows, the galaxy had been losing against an enemy that consumed entire stars. 50 species working together couldn't stop them. In desperation, they had asked the humans for help. The humans had won the war in 6 months, but their methods were so chaotic, so utterly beyond any reasonable strategy, that the victorious allies had immediately agreed to isolate Earth. The humans hadn't used superior technology. They hadn't used larger numbers. They had used something far more dangerous, creativity born from a species that evolved on a world that constantly tried to kill them. Velian grabbed the tablet and ran back to the council chamber. She burst through the doors, interrupting another round of pointless arguments. "I found something," she gasped, out of breath from running, "in the deep archives. A species that might be able to help." She held up the tablet. Several council members recoiled when they saw the warning symbols. "No," said Elder Morgoth immediately. "Not them. Never them." "You know about humans?" Velian asked. The room went silent. The word humans seemed to hang in the air like a curse. "I am old enough to remember," Morgoth said slowly. "They were quarantined for good reason. The gods themselves fear what humans might become if left unchecked." "Gods fear them?" Krixval asked, his feathers standing on end. "With good reason," Morgoth replied. "Humans don't follow the rules, any rules, not physical rules, not social rules, not even the rules of logic. They look at the impossible and ask why not. They treat the laws of physics as suggestions." "But can they stop the devourers?" Velian asked. Morgoth was quiet for a long moment. "If anything in this universe can stop beings made of pure entropy, it would be a species that weaponizes chaos itself." Another system went dark on the displays. "Billions more lives lost. We're out of options," Zeftar said grimly. "We either call the humans or we wait for the devourers to consume everything." The vote was called. 5 species voted against, 3 abstained, too frightened to choose. But the majority voted yes. The quantum barriers around Earth would be lowered. The humans would be called. As the council prepared the message to send to Earth, Velian read the last line on the tablet. A warning from the species that had written it. "When you have no options left, you call the humans, but remember, once they're involved, nothing will ever be the same again." Above them, the devourers continued their feast, unaware that the galaxy had just made a decision that would change the nature of reality itself. The quantum barriers around Earth fell away like curtains being pulled back. For 3,000 years, humanity had been isolated, unaware that they were quarantined. Now, the message from the Galactic Council reached them in an instant. On Earth, the message appeared on every screen, every device, and every language. It was simple and desperate. "We need your help. The universe is ending." The first human ship to respond wasn't military. It wasn't even government. The Steady Eddie was a mining vessel working in the asteroid belt, captained by Grace Palmer. She was eating lunch when the message came through. She read it twice, then called her crew to the bridge. "So, aliens are real," she said to her crew, of 20. "And they need our help." "What kind of help?" asked her first mate, Tony Martinez. Grace shrugged. "They say something called, 'The Devourers is eating reality itself.' They want to know if we can stop it." The crew exchanged glances. They were miners, not soldiers. but they were also human. "Well," said Tony, "we better go see what we can do." Within hours, Earth's response was unlike anything the Galactic Council expected. Instead of a coordinated military response, ships of every kind started leaving Earth's orbit. Military vessels, yes, but also cargo haulers, science ships, tourist vessels, and even a few prison transports. It was chaos. Admiral John Carter tried to establish some order. He commanded Earth's official response fleet, but humans weren't good at following official anything. By the time he reached the coordinates the aliens had provided, hundreds of human ships were already there, doing whatever they felt like doing. The Galactic Council watched in bewilderment. They had expected humanity to send their best warriors, their most advanced weapons. Instead, they got Grace Palmer asking practical questions. "How many people are we talking about saving here?" she asked during the first meeting. "Trillions upon trillions of sentient beings," Crixval answered. Grace nodded. "Okay. Send us everything you have on these devourers. How they move, how they think, what they've eaten, what gave them indigestion. Every detail might matter," the Council provided, all their data. Thousands of years of observations, failed military campaigns, scientific analysis. The humans absorbed it all, but not in the way the Council expected. While the Council's military strategists looked for weak points to attack, a human physicist named Amy Rodriguez wondered about the Devourer's diet. They eat reality, but do they get nutrition from it? Or are they just hungry all the time? A marine biologist named Kevin Park studied the movement patterns. "These look like migration routes," he said. "Maybe they're not invading. Maybe they're running from something." A child psychologist named Lisa Stone asked the question no one else thought to ask. "Has anyone tried talking to them?" "They're beings of pure entropy," Morgoth explained patiently. "They have no consciousness we can detect." "You sure about that?" Lisa asked. "My daughter's goldfish didn't seem conscious either, but it learned to recognize her face." The Council members looked at each other in confusion. This was not how advanced species approached existential threats. But it got stranger. Humans started arriving with equipment that made no sense. A ship full of musicians brought instruments and sound equipment. A group of artists brought paint and holographic projectors. 3 ships of mathematicians brought nothing but computers loaded with paradoxes and unsolvable equations. "What are you planning to do?" Zeftar asked a human engineer named Rita Chang, who was modifying mining equipment. "Not sure yet," Rita admitted. "But in my experience, every problem is just a nail if you have a big enough hammer." The Council learned quickly that humans had evolved on what they called a death world. Earth was a planet of constant danger. Hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanoes, diseases, predators. Everything on Earth seemed designed to kill humans. While other species evolved in harmony with their environments, humans evolved in spite of theirs. This explained their biology. Humans could survive injuries that would kill most species instantly. They could eat things that were poison to others. They could run for hours without stopping, a hunting technique called persistence predation that terrified every prey species in the Council. But it was their psychology that truly set them apart. Humans bonded with everything. They gave names to their machines. They felt sad when they had to throw away old clothing. They could feel empathy for their enemies, even while fighting them. "We had a war once," Admiral Carter explained to the Council. "World War I, we called it. On Christmas Day, soldiers from both sides stopped fighting. They came out of their trenches, shared food, played football together. Then the next day, they went back to killing each other." "That makes no sense," said the Nexari leader. "Welcome to humanity," Carter replied. The humans studied the Devourer data with an intensity that bordered on obsession. But they weren't looking at it the way the Council did. Where the Council saw an enemy to destroy, humans saw a puzzle to solve. A programmer named Marcus Gray found something interesting. "These consumption patterns aren't random," he announced. "There's a sequence here. It's like they're following a path we can't see." "Quantum pathways," said Amy Rodriguez. "They're moving along quantum probability lines. That's why they seem to appear randomly. They're following roads we can't perceive." Can we predict where they'll go next? Asked Crixaval hopefully. Better, said Marcus. I think we can herd them. The council was shocked. Herd them? They're beings of pure entropy. So is my 2-year-old, said Lisa Stone. But I can still get him to eat his vegetables if I arrange them like a smiley face. The humans' approach to the crisis was so different that the council didn't know how to respond. Where the galaxy's greatest minds sought weapons of unimaginable power, humans asked questions like, what if we annoyed them into leaving? And, can we give them food poisoning? A short-order cook named Billy Chen, working on a transport ship's kitchen, had been reading the data while he cooked. Something nagged at him, a memory from his grandmother's stories about hungry ghosts, spirits that could never be satisfied because they were eating the wrong thing. What if they're not trying to eat reality? He said to anyone who would listen. What if they're looking for something else and eating reality is just them being frustrated? The idea spread through the human fleet like wildfire, not through official channels but through the chaotic network of communication that humans naturally created. Someone would mention it in a message to a friend, who would tell their captain, who would discuss it with another ship's crew during a poker game. This was another thing that baffled the council. Humans facing the end of the universe had started a poker tournament between ships. They were betting on who could come up with the craziest solution to the Devourer problem. Current winner was a janitor who suggested they try to make the Devourers laugh themselves to death. Don't you understand the gravity of this situation? Maltor of the Nexari demanded. Of course we do, Grace Palmer replied. But humans think better when we're not panicking. And honestly, if the universe is going to end, we might as well enjoy the time we have left. The council watched as humans prepared for the confrontation with the Devourers. Their preparations made no sense. Instead of formation drills and weapon checks, humans were painting their ships with bizarre patterns, loading them with random cargo and practicing what they called aggressive interpretive dance. You have to understand, Admiral Carter tried to explain, humans have a saying. If it's stupid but it works, it's not stupid. We're about to test that theory on a cosmic scale. Elder Morgoth, who had lived long enough to see humans in action before, said quietly to the others, "This is why we quarantined them. Not because they're evil, not because they're violent, but because they make the impossible possible through sheer refusal to accept that it's impossible." As the human fleet prepared to meet the Devourers, one last ship arrived from Earth. It was small, clearly civilian, and broadcasting music at volumes that distorted space around it. The ship's name was painted on its hull in letters that hurt to look at. Hold my beer. Its captain, Danny White, sent a simple message to the fleet. I've got an idea, it's really stupid. Want to try it? The response from the human fleet was unanimous. Oh, hell yes. The Galactic Council could only watch as humanity prepared to face entropy itself with nothing but chaos, creativity, and a complete inability to accept that something couldn't be done. The Galactic Council watched from their observation deck as the human fleet moved toward the Devourer mass. The beings of entropy had just finished consuming another star system, leaving nothing but void behind. The Council expected the humans to attack from a safe distance, using long-range weapons like any sensible species would. Instead, Danny White's ship, the Hold My Beer, accelerated straight toward the largest Devourer. What is he doing? Crixaval squawked, his feathers standing straight up. Something stupid, Admiral Carter replied calmly. That's why it might work. Danny's ship was broadcasting music at impossible volumes. The sound waves were so powerful, they created visible distortions in space. It was ancient Earth music, something called heavy metal, all screaming guitars and pounding drums. The music had no harmony, no peace, only controlled chaos. The Devourer that had been moving steadily forward suddenly stopped. It writhed, twisted, pulled back. It had never encountered anything like this before. Ordered chaos, patterns that made no sense yet followed rules. It's confused, Amy Rodriguez observed from her science vessel. The music is a paradox. It's structured but chaotic, meaningful but senseless. While the Devourer tried to process this impossibility, 3 human ships moved in. They started bombarding it with contradictory information. mathematical proofs that proved themselves wrong, physics equations that violated their own principles, images that couldn't exist but did. "My grandfather was a philosopher," said the captain of one ship. "He always said the best way to break a computer was to ask it to divide by 0. Let's see if these things are any different." The council watched in amazement as the devourer began to slow down. It wasn't destroyed, wasn't damaged, but it was definitely confused, like a predator that had bitten into something that tasted wrong. Grace Palmer coordinated the next phase. "All ships start pattern alpha. And remember, the point is to make no sense at all." The human fleet began moving in deliberately chaotic patterns. Ships flew upside down relative to galactic orientation. They spun in circles while moving forward. Some flew backward while their crews pretended everything was normal. One ship was broadcasting a cooking show while flying through the devourer mass. "This is insane," Zeftar said. "This is human," Morgoth corrected. The devourers, beings that existed outside normal spacetime, had never encountered anything like human chaos. They consumed order, fed on the structured reality of the universe. But humans were serving them something different, reality that was both ordered and chaotic, sensible and mad, existing and impossible all at once. Marcus Gray and his team of programmers had been working non-stop. They had found more patterns in the devourer's behavior. "They're not just following quantum pathways," he announced. "They're creating them. The devourers are building something." "Building what?" asked the council. "A network. Like neurons in a brain, they're connected to each other, sharing information instantly across any distance." Lisa Stone, the child psychologist, perked up. "So they're not individual creatures. They're one giant mind." "More like a hungry giant mind that's eating everything, because it doesn't know what else to do," Marcus replied. This changed everything. If the devourers were a consciousness, even an alien one, then communication might be possible. The humans immediately started trying everything they could think of. A linguist named Sophie Williams tried broadcasting mathematical sequences. An artist named Carlos Vega created visual patterns that told stories without words. A musician named Janet Park played compositions that expressed emotions through pure sound. Nothing worked. The devourers continued consuming reality, though they seemed slower, more hesitant when humans were nearby. Then Billy Chen, the cook who had mentioned hungry ghosts, had another idea. "What if they're not trying to communicate with us? What if they're trying to communicate with something else and eating reality is their way of screaming for attention?" Rita Cheng, the engineer who had been modifying mining equipment, had finished her work. She had created what she called reality anchors, devices that made spacetime too stable, too solid for the devourers to consume. "It's like making food. Too tough to chew," she explained. The humans started deploying the anchors, creating safe zones where reality couldn't be eaten. But instead of using them defensively, they arranged them in patterns. Lines, circles, symbols. They were writing messages with stability itself. The effect was immediate. The devourers swarmed around the patterns, examining them but unable to consume them. They pushed against the anchors, tested them, and then something amazing happened. They started creating their own patterns in response. "They're writing back," Sophie Williams breathed. The patterns were incomprehensible at first, but humans had something most species didn't: pattern recognition that bordered on the supernatural. Where others saw random shapes, humans saw meaning. It came from evolving on a world where recognizing the pattern of a predator in tall grass meant the difference between life and death. A team of codebreakers, led by an old woman named Dorothy Chen who had spent her life solving puzzles for fun, worked on translating the patterns. It took them 6 hours. The council had been working on similar problems for centuries without success. "They're lost," Dorothy announced. "The devourers are lost." The message, when finally translated, was heartbreaking in its simplicity. The devourers were the universe's maintenance system, beings that existed to consume damaged reality and prevent paradoxes from spreading. They had been doing this job since the beginning of time. But something had gone wrong. A cosmic event, something the devourers called the Great Silence, had damaged their ability to tell the difference between healthy reality and corrupted reality. They were eating everything because they couldn't tell what needed to be fixed anymore. "They're not invaders," Lisa Stone said softly. "They're janitors who've gone blind and are trying to clean everything because they can't see what's dirty and what's clean." The council was stunned. They had been fighting the universe's immune system. "Can we fix them?" Krixaval asked. "Fix beings of pure entropy that exist outside space-time?" said a Nexari scientist. "Impossible." Admiral Carter grinned. "You keep using that word around humans. Haven't you learned yet?" The solution came from 9-year-old Emma Watson. She was on the science vessel with her mother, a maintenance worker. She had been watching everything with the simple clarity that only children possess. "Why don't we just teach them the difference again?" she asked. "Like training a dog. Show them what's good and what's bad." The adults in the room looked at each other. It was so simple it was stupid, which meant by human logic it might work. "We'll need bait," said Amy Rodriguez. "Something corrupted for them to eat, so we can reward them when they choose correctly." "I can create paradoxes," offered Marcus Gray. "Small ones, controlled ones. We'll mark them clearly as food." "Like putting a dog's food in a specific bowl," Emma added helpfully. The plan that formed was insane by galactic standards. Humans would create small tiers in reality, tiny paradoxes that were clearly marked and contained. They would offer these to the devourers. When the devourers ate the paradoxes but left normal reality alone, the humans would reward them. "Reward them with what?" asked Morgoth. "Appreciation," Lisa Stone said. "Everyone wants to be told they're doing a good job, even entropy beings." The council couldn't believe what they were witnessing. Humans were preparing to train beings of pure entropy like they were puppies. Ships were being modified to create and contain paradoxes. Crews were practicing what they called positive reinforcement techniques. One ship captain announced he was going to try using a clicker, like for dog training. Another suggested treats. Someone else proposed teaching the devourers to play fetch with small black holes. "This will never work," Maltor of the Nexari stated, flatly. "Want to bet?" Grace Palmer asked. "Loser has to sing karaoke at the victory party." "Victory party? You're planning a party while the universe ends?" "Of course," Grace replied. "Win or lose, we're going to have one hell of a story to tell." As the human fleet prepared for the most ridiculous training program in cosmic history, the Devourers continued their advance. But something had changed. They moved more slowly now, more carefully. The patterns they created in response to human messages were becoming more complex. They were learning. "You know what I think?" Danny White said over the comm. "I think they're lonely. They've been doing this job forever and no one ever thanked them. No one ever even knew they existed except to fear them." "So we're going to befriend entropy itself?" Admiral Carter asked. "Why not?" Danny replied. "Humans have made friends with weirder things. I once knew a guy who had an emotional support, rock." The first training session was about to begin. Humans had created a controlled paradox, a bubble of space where up was down, left was right, and time moved backward. It was clearly marked with Rita's reality anchors, impossible to mistake for normal space. The entire galaxy held its breath as the Devourers approached the paradox. They circled it, examined it, tested it. Then they consumed it, leaving the normal space around it untouched. The human fleet erupted in celebration. Ships fired fireworks. Who brings fireworks to face cosmic entropy? Crews cheered and someone started playing "We Are the Champions" across all communication channels. The training program was unlike anything the universe had ever seen. Humans were teaching beings of pure entropy the difference between healthy reality and corrupted reality, and they were doing it with the same patience they used to teach kindergarten children. Sandra Lopez, a marine biologist who had spent years training dolphins, took charge of developing the communication system. She worked with quantum fluctuations, creating pulses that the Devourers could understand. "It's like teaching sign language to something that doesn't have hands," she explained. "So we use the language they do understand. Quantum states." Within days, a basic vocabulary was established. The devourers learned symbols for good, bad, eat, don't eat, and surprisingly, friend. Patrick Murphy, a high school teacher from Ireland, created lesson plans. He had to figure out how to educate beings that existed outside of time, experiencing all moments simultaneously. The trick, he said, is repetition. Even if they experience everything at once, patterns still matter. It's like how a song is still a song even if you hear all the notes at the same time. The council watched in disbelief as human ships flew alongside the devourers, guiding them through space. When the entropy beings approached normal reality, humans would create warning patterns. When they found actual paradoxes or corrupted space, humans would mark it as food. Joseph Brown, a farmer from Kansas, had perhaps the strangest job. He figured out how to cultivate paradoxes. It's like growing crops, he said. You need the right conditions. Too much chaos and the paradox collapses. Too much order and it won't form at all. You need just the right balance. He set up paradox farms in dead zones of space, areas already damaged by the devourers' earlier feeding. These became feeding grounds where the devourers could eat safely without harming inhabited systems. The relationship between humans and devourers grew stronger each day. Crews started naming individual devourers, even though they were all part of the same collective, consciousness. Bob was the one that seemed curious about human music. Alice liked to create spiral patterns. Fred had figured out how to play a simple game of quantum tag. But not everyone was happy with humanity's approach. The Nexari leadership called an emergency council meeting. "This is madness," Maltor declared. "You're not defeating them. You're making them pets." "Would you prefer we let them eat the universe?" Grace Palmer asked. "We should be finding a way to destroy them." "They're the universe's immune system," Admiral Carter reminded him. "Destroy them, and the next time a real paradox threatens reality, we'll have no defense." Elder Morgoth, who had lived through the last human intervention, understood what was happening. "This is what humans do," he said. "They don't destroy. They're enemies. They turn them into allies. It's terrifying because it works." The breakthrough came from Emma Watson, the 9-year-old who had suggested training the devourers in the first place. She had been watching them create patterns and noticed something. "They're trying to show us something," she told her mother. "Look, it's the same pattern over and over, but bigger each time." Dorothy Chen and her team analyzed the patterns. They were coordinates, but not in normal space. They were locations in quantum probability space, the invisible roads the devourers traveled. "They're showing us where they came from," Dorothy realized. "They want to go home." The origin point was deep in quantum space, a place where reality was more fluid, where paradoxes were normal. It was where the devourers had been created, at the beginning of time, their spawning ground and base of operations. But something was wrong there. The patterns showed corruption, damage, a wound in the fabric of existence itself. That's what caused the Great Silence. Amy Rodriguez understood. Something damaged their home, and it damaged them in the process. They've been trying to fix it by eating everything, but they're just making it worse. "Can we fix it?" asked Crixaval. The human scientists looked at each other. It would require going into quantum probability space, navigating roads that didn't properly exist, and repairing damage to the fundamental structure of reality. "Absolutely not," said every non-human scientist in the room. "It's impossible." "Great," said Rita Chang. "So we'll need about 3 days." The plan they developed was insane even by human standards. They would teach the devourers to guide them through quantum space. Then, they would go to the source of the damage and fix it. How? They weren't sure yet, but humans had a saying. "We'll burn that bridge when we get to it." Danny White volunteered to pilot the first ship through quantum space. "I've done stupider things," he said. Probably. His ship was modified with Rita's reality anchors, but reversed. Instead of making space too stable to eat, they would make the ship unstable enough to exist in quantum probability space. "It's like making yourself dizzy on purpose so the spinning room feels normal," Rita explained, which didn't help anyone understand better. The journey into quantum space was broadcast to the entire galaxy. The Hold My Beer, with Danny at the helm and a crew of volunteers, flew directly into a devourer. But instead of being consumed, they were transported. The images they sent back were impossible to process. Colors that didn't exist, shapes with more or fewer than 3 dimensions, time moving in circles and squares, and something Danny described as purple-flavored. "I can taste mathematics," one crew member reported. "It's kind of minty." They were guided by the Devourers, who were gentle, careful, making sure the humans weren't damaged by the journey. It was like being carried by a careful parent. At the center of quantum space, they found it. The wound. It was massive, a tear in reality that was growing, spreading, corrupting everything around it. The Devourers had been trying to eat it for eons, but it just grew larger. "It's a paradox that feeds on being consumed," Amy Rodriguez understood. "The more they eat it, the bigger it gets. It's a cosmic cancer." "So how do we cure cancer in reality itself?" Danny asked. The answer came from Billy Chen, the cook. He had been thinking about his grandmother's stories again. In the stories, hungry ghosts could only be satisfied by acceptance, he said. Not by feeding them, but by acknowledging them. What if this paradox exists because something needs to be acknowledged? They studied the wound more carefully. Deep in its center, they found something unexpected, a message. It was old, older than most civilizations, written in the fundamental mathematics of the universe itself. Dorothy Chen translated it. It was a cry for help, a last message from a species that had tried to ascend beyond physical reality, but had gotten stuck halfway. They existed and didn't exist simultaneously, and their suffering had torn a hole in reality. "They're still alive?" Grace Palmer asked. "Alive, dead, and everything in between," Amy replied. "They're stuck in a superposition of states. So we need to collapse the wave function," Marcus Gray said. "Force them to choose one state or another." "But how do you make someone choose whether to exist or not?" asked Lisa Stone, Emma Watson, who had somehow convinced her mother to let her come on this insane journey, raised her hand. "You ask them nicely." The adults looked at her. "Seriously," she continued. "They've been stuck for so long. Maybe no one ever asked them what they want." It was so simple it was brilliant, or so brilliant it was simple. With humans, it was hard to tell the difference. Using the communication system they had developed with the Devourers, the humans reached out to the stuck species. The message was simple. You don't have to suffer. You can choose. Whatever you decide will help. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The stuck species had been waiting eons for someone to give them permission to let go. They chose unanimously to complete their ascension, to fully leave physical reality behind. As they departed, the wound began to heal. The Devourers, no longer confused by the paradox, began their real work, carefully stitching reality back together, removing the corruption that had spread from the wound. "They're happy," Lisa Stone observed, watching the patterns the Devourers created. For the first time in eons, they're doing what they were meant to do. The journey back to normal space was triumphant. The Devourers carried the human ships carefully, proudly, like a dog carrying its favorite toy. They had been saved, and more importantly, they had been understood. When the Hold My Beer emerged back into normal space, the entire galaxy was watching. Danny White's first words were recorded for history. "Someone owes me a beer. Actually, everyone owes me a beer." The Devourers spread throughout the galaxy, but now as protectors, not destroyers. They consumed paradoxes, prevented reality tears, and maintained the stability of existence. And they did it with human partners because humans were the only species crazy enough to work alongside entropy itself. Space stations were built where humans and Devourers could work together. Children played quantum peekaboo with baby Devourers. Scientists studied the nature of reality with the universe's own maintenance crew as teachers. The impossible had become normal, which, for humans, was perfectly normal. 6 months had passed since humanity saved the universe by befriending entropy itself. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The Galactic Council met in their grand chamber, but now it looked different. Where once there had been rigid order, assigned seats and formal protocols, there was now what humans called organized chaos. A devourer floated in one corner, creating beautiful patterns while a human child tried to teach it cat's cradle with quantum strings. Ambassador Crixval stood to give his report, though he had to speak louder than usual because someone was playing jazz music in the background. The humans insisted it helped everyone think better. The integration of humanity into galactic society has been... He paused, searching for words. Unprecedented. That was an understatement. In 6 months, humans had revolutionized everything, not through force or superior technology, but through their sheer refusal to accept that things had to be done a certain way. Trade routes now went through quantum probability space, guided by devourers and their human partners. What once took months now took days. The Nexari had complained it was impossible, right up until a human cargo ship delivered fresh pizza from Earth to their homeworld, still hot. Medical science had advanced centuries. Humans shared their knowledge of working with impossible things, teaching other species that sometimes the best cure for a quantum disease was a paradox medicine that both did and didn't exist until you took it. But perhaps the biggest change was in how the galaxy dealt with problems. The old way had been to find the biggest weapon, the strongest shield, the most powerful force. The human way was to ask, what if we tried making friends with it? This approach had solved 3 other galactic crises in 6 months. The Void Singers, beings that destroyed planets with resonance frequencies, turned out to be trying to compose music but couldn't hear their own songs. Humans gave them hearing aids made from salvaged reality anchors. The Nightmare Plague, a psychic virus that drove entire species insane, was cured when a human therapist realized it was just trying to tell everyone about its traumatic childhood. 2 sessions of talk therapy and the plague became a helpful dream guardian. The gray goo, self-replicating machines that consumed everything to make more of themselves, were stopped when humans taught them about sustainable farming and resource management. Now they ran the galaxy's best recycling program. Every crisis has become an opportunity for friendship, Morgoth observed. It's disturbing how well it works. Grace Palmer, who had become humanity's unofficial ambassador to the Devourers, gave her own report. The Devourers have cleared 17 reality tiers this month, she said. They've also started what they call art. They create stable paradoxes that don't need to be consumed just for the beauty of it. There's one near Alpha Centauri that looks like a flower blooming in 7 dimensions. Tourism is up 3,000%. The mention of tourism brought groans from several council members. Humans had turned everything into a tourist attraction. See the void where reality ended. Pet a tame devourer. Experience quantum probability space. Warning, may cause temporary existence uncertainty. Admiral Carter addressed the military concerns. The galaxy is more secure than it's ever been. Not because we have better weapons, but because potential threats keep joining our side. Last week, a species planning to invade changed their minds after we invited them to a barbecue. Turns out, they just wanted someone to appreciate their culture. They make excellent potato salad. The Nexari leader, Maltor, stood up. He had been the strongest opponent of human methods, but even he had to admit the results. I owe the human Grace Palmer a karaoke song, he announced. I lost our bet. The human methods, as insane as they are, have worked. The room erupted in cheers, mostly from humans who immediately started taking bets on what song he would sing. But then the lights dimmed. The temperature dropped. Something was coming, something that made even the devourers pull back in concern. 3 beings appeared in the center of the chamber. They were impossible to describe, existing in states that shouldn't be possible. They radiated power that made reality itself bend around them. These were the beings that called themselves gods. We have been watching, one spoke, its voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. The humans have disrupted the order we established at the beginning of time. The room fell silent. Even the jazz music stopped. You were meant to quarantine them, another god said, looking at the council. They were never supposed to spread their chaos across the galaxy. With respect, Grace Palmer said, standing up, your order was killing the universe. The Devourers were broken. Reality was tearing itself apart, and you did nothing. The gods turned their attention to her. Most beings would have been destroyed by their gaze alone. Grace just stared back. "We do not intervene," the third god stated. "That is the rule." "Well, your rules suck," Danny White said, walking to stand beside Grace. "And I'm pretty sure that's why you're really here. You're scared." "We fear nothing," the first god declared. "Sure you do," Danny continued. "You fear us? Not because we're powerful, but because we don't follow your rules. We look at your cosmic order and say, nah, we can do better." And we do. Emma Watson, now 10 years old and considered the galaxy's foremost expert on devourer psychology, raised her hand. "Are you lonely?" she asked the gods. The entire room held its breath. You didn't ask gods if they were lonely. But the gods paused. They looked at each other. These beings that had existed since the beginning of time, maintaining order, never intervening, always watching. "We are what we are," one finally answered. "That's not an answer," Emma said. "You made all the rules for the universe, but you made them so you could never play. That's like creating a playground and then only being the teacher watching from inside. That's sad." Lisa Stone, the psychologist, understood immediately. "You're not gods. You're the universe's administrators. You keep everything running, but you can never participate. You can never live." The revelation hung in the air. These beings, these gods, were prisoners of their own creation. They had made rules they couldn't break, established order they couldn't change. So change the rules, Admiral Carter suggested. If you made them, you can unmake them. "Impossible," the gods said in unison. Every human in the room grinned. "There's that word again," Grace said. "You really haven't been paying attention, have you?" What followed was the strangest therapy session in cosmic history. Humans taught gods how to break their own rules. Not to destroy order, but to participate in it. To experience rather than just observe. Billy Chen taught them about cooking, how combining order, recipes with chaos, creativity, created something better than either alone. Rita Chang showed them how to build things that shouldn't work, but did. Joseph Brown explained farming, creating life from dirt and seeds and hope. The devourers joined in, showing the gods how they had learned to create art from paradoxes. Other species, emboldened by human example, shared their own contributions. Within hours, the gods were learning to exist rather than just oversee. One was attempting to paint, creating colors that hadn't existed before. Another was learning to sing, its voice causing new harmonies in the cosmic background radiation. The third was playing poker with Danny White and somehow losing despite being omniscient. "This is why you really feared us," Grace Palmer said to them. "Not because we would destroy your order, but because we would make you question why you needed it in the first place." The gods, for the first time in existence, laughed. It sounded like supernovas being born. As the gathering continued, turning into what humans naturally made everything into, a party, Ambassador Krixval made one final note in his report. "The humans have done something no force in the universe could accomplish. They have made gods mortal, not by taking away their power, but by teaching them how to be alive. The age of rigid order is over. The age of creative chaos has begun." Somewhere in the corner, Emma Watson was teaching a god and a devourer how to play hopscotch across dimensions. The god was losing but laughing. The devourer had figured out how to cheat by existing in multiple probability states at once. Emma was inventing new rules as they played. Elder Morgoth watched it all and remembered his earlier warning about humans. He had been right. Once humans were involved, nothing would ever be the same. But he had been wrong about one thing. It wasn't terrifying, it was wonderful. The universe was no longer a machine running on predetermined rules. It was alive, chaotic, unpredictable, and beautiful. And at the center of it all were humans, the species that looked at entropy and asked if it wanted to be friends, that taught gods how to play, that saved the universe not through force but through the simple act of caring. As the party continued, spreading across the galaxy, through quantum space and into dimensions that hadn't existed until someone wondered what was there. One truth became clear. The universe had called on humans in its darkest hour, expecting warriors. Instead, it got something far more powerful. A species that refused to accept impossible, that weaponized friendship, and that treated the laws of physics as suggestions. The gods had been right to fear humans, but they had been wrong about why. Humans weren't dangerous because they brought chaos. They were